According to multiple sources, the Miami Heat are expected to have interest in a trade for two-time All-Star Chicago's Zach LaVine. But is that the right choice for the Heat? We analyze the pros and cons of a potential deal. Plus, Miami's won 6 in a row, and we've got some stats to show the secret of their success. A great episode you won't want to miss on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg. Joining me as always is David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We're talking about Zach LaVine today. The Athletic reporting this week that the Bulls are increasingly open to trading LaVine and that LaVine is increasingly open to getting traded. We'll talk about some specific packages later on, but as we know, anytime a big name is on the market, the Heat will be mentioned as a destination. David, what are your thoughts on Zach LaVine as a potential target for the Heat?
I think it's a terrible choice. I don't think he fits at all. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that, and you could look at the salaries, and right away, that is something that would crucify Miami over the next few years and lock them into a bad deal that they'll never be able to unload. And it's not for a noticeable improvement of talent over what Tyler Herro and whomever else you might have to trade in order to acquire LaVine. I know there's the possibility of not having to trade Tyler in order to acquire LaVine, but I think that would be an even worse fit overall. And as far as talent is concerned, honestly, I'm not a believer in LaVine. Maybe a couple of years ago, you could have made that argument as a high-volume scorer. But as time has gone on, I think it's sapped what athleticism he has. He's only 28, and yet he's just never been the kind of player that a lot of people perceive him to be. The drives to the basket just don't exist. If they ever really did, like the incredible dunks, the slam dunk competition and everything else like that, I think those really stood out when he was much younger. But now he's mostly just a finesse guy. He's a mid-range shot taker. He's an occasional three-point shooter. And those shots don't fall with enough regularity to want to pay him $47 million over the next couple of seasons. I don't see it as a good deal at all. I find myself hard-pressed to think what team might possibly want him. He's only made the playoffs once in his career. I won't go so far as to say that he's fully responsible there, but he does strike me as a looter and a riot when it comes to his production offensively. Defensively, he might be worse than Tyler, and he doesn't really share the ball all that much. I can't think of a worse fit for Miami than Zach LaVine.
Well, I appreciate the strong take right off the bat. I kind of like Zach LaVine as a player a little bit more than you, but I'm with you in terms of the fit.
Okay, I thought you were going to go complete 180 and be like, you know what? I think he'd be great in Miami.
No, look, in terms of the fit, I'm with you. It doesn't make sense. The Heat have a better wing in Jimmy Butler. They have a cheaper one in Tyler Herro. I'm not really sure where Zach LaVine would fit in that group. And you're right on about the salary. The salary is a major problem. He's making $40 million this year. He's going to be making upwards of that amount for the next 3 years. He's owed $138 million over the next 3 years. I think LaVine, if you were to put him and Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo together, that's a formidable trio that maybe could make it work. But you're so far down the line on this thing. You're already having some problems working Tyler Herro into this mix, and he's been here. You know what I mean? But as you're trying to develop Tyler Herro, they've ran into some issues in terms of their on-court chemistry. I think that you just double that with Zach LaVine. I mean, Tyler Herro and Zach LaVine, like, they're basically the same player. Like, Zach LaVine is the closest comp to Tyler Herro in the NBA. You would probably like for them to shoot a few more catch-and-shoot threes. They pull up probably more than you'd like. Defensively, there's obviously concerns there. They're developing playmakers, I think, but they're not natural ones. And defensively, there's issues there too. So I don't know that LaVine makes a ton of sense for Miami. The salary is a big deal. If you're trading for Zach LaVine, you're basically going all in on that. And I just don't know that that's the kind of guy that you want to go all in on. I think that there's really good fits elsewhere in the league. That's, I guess, the rest of the league's problem, and it's for them to figure out. But in terms of where the Miami Heat stand, I don't know that I would go there. Although I will say this, we're going to get to some potential trade packages, and there are ways to make this a conversation. But if you're including a young asset like Tyler Herro, who is a more valuable asset right now, to me, it's a non-starter. And I don't have to think too much about it. I'm basically with you in terms of the fit in Miami. I kind of don't have to think about this much, right? I kind of think the Zach LaVine thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I would move on pretty easily, especially if it's going to cost you your best young asset in Herro and draft picks and things like that, which I would imagine it would cost.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as a complementary player to what Miami has. And that's a problem. Like we're talking about Tyler and his fit. And you made that point just now, that the Heat are still trying to figure out how to maximize Tyler and incorporate him into the best version of himself and still be within the flow of the offense where everything is moving and everything is as efficient as possible. And while we saw flashes of that from Tyler, and we know that there's room for improvement throughout the rest of his career, I don't see that LaVine is going to take a leap here. And I hate to sound like a hater, but I also think that the problem is that he was drafted by a really bad Minnesota team, and that team was a group of guys that didn't have any direction. There was no purpose on that team. And then he was traded to Chicago for Jimmy Butler, and that team had no purpose. He's been on really bad teams, and he's just never learned how to harness
he was asked to
his
be
skills in a winning way. Yeah.
No, it's fair, but he was asked to be the leading guy in Minnesota, and then he was asked to basically replace Jimmy Butler in Chicago. I think there's something to be said about, hey, if you get him in a situation where he is clearly not the guy, not the savior, and he can be more of a complimentary player, maybe he would just fall back into a complimentary role. And maybe that will happen. I just think it's a really big risk when you're paying him that kind of money. And by the way, if you want him as a complimentary player, $40 million doesn't exactly scream complimentary player. And that's the other part of this too. If you added him to this roster with Jimmy Butler making $45 million a year, Bam Adebayo making something close to that, and if, let's say, even Tyler Herro is still on the roster at $25 million a year, you're talking about like an LA Clippers, Golden State Warriors type of payroll. And Mick Garrison has spent money, but he does not spend money like Joe Lacob, and he does not spend money like Steve Ballmer. Nobody does. And so I just don't see it as even feasible, even if you're able to unload a Duncan Robinson long-term salary. Obviously, Kyle Lowry is expiring. Like, those are the next biggest salaries on the paper there. Even that wouldn't even come close to sort of the long-term salary commitment that you would be bringing on there.
Miami fans just need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, because it seems, again, that they have lost the forest for the trees, as the expression goes. Like, the acquisition of talent makes sense, but it has to be talent that fits right. You can't just throw talented players and have them figure it out on the fly, especially not with Jimmy Butler and Bam and their respective strengths and weaknesses. Like, LaVine is a scorer, but he's not. I don't know that it would work. Like, I mean, I know the idea behind him and Dame Lillard is kind of similar, right? Like, they need a guy who can take on the brunt of the scoring in late game situations. They need guys to put pressure on the rim as scorers and things of that sort. But I don't know that, again, as much as LaVine might be able to evolve into a more complementary role, at $47 million, like, that doesn't seem like the right fit. Like, to me, you look at what this team has been able to accomplish over the 6-game win streak and over the last couple of seasons, they were missing key role players that might have stepped up in these situations, not necessarily just a guy who could put up 30 on any given night. And I don't even know that LaVine is that player anymore. Like, he might have some opportunities. He might have an occasional night here and there where he's got it going, but that's just not the guy who you can go to regularly. And again, the salary.
You got to the main point there. If it costs you Tyler Herro, it's not worth it. Tyler Herro is cheaper and probably will be better than Zach LaVine within the next year, 2 years max. I mean, he's younger, right? He's 23. Zach LaVine is 28. So if it costs you Tyler Herro, to me, it's a non-starter. If you add LaVine to a team with Tyler Herro, now that's going against the development that you're trying to get with Tyler Herro, and you're kind of putting him in the way of Tyler's development. And that's $65 million this year tied up into two very redundant players. So I just don't think it makes any sense from Miami's perspective. But is there another guard that the Heat should be targeting in a trade that's a bit more realistic and a better fit? We talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. And whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, Every week, we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. You pick one player from Josh's lineup, and basically, he's got a great team. He's got Bilal Coulibaly. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Skylar Mays, Jacob Gilliard, Keontae George, and our very own Kyle Lowry. Lowry had a low usage to begin the season, but without Tyler, he's got to step up. That's according to Josh. We've seen Kyle step up in these situations. He's had some nice moments here and there. I'm sure he probably would contribute a lot to, somebody's fantasy lineup there. But he also got into early foul trouble just recently. What do you think of Josh's pick of Kyle as a potential fantasy pick?
At this point in the season, it's so hard to find waiver wire pickups, especially if you're a team that, for instance, might have had CJ McCollum on their roster before the collapsed lung incident. I am one of those people. I am kind of looking for guard help at this point. Kyle Lowry for a couple of weeks while you're sort of waiting out these injuries. Maybe you have Tyler Herro in your lineup, right? And he's out. I mean, Kyle Lowry makes a lot of sense in terms of that. There's not a whole lot of great options. I kind of like the Keontae George option too. Honestly, I mean, this guy has been in Utah, put him into the starting lineup over the last 3 games. He's averaging 9 assists per game as a starter for the Jazz in that ball movement system. I like both of those pickups.
Yeah. No. Well, Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you with your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. And I know that when you're looking to get parts for your car, it could be a little tricky. You go to an auto parts shop and maybe they don't have the right parts for you, or maybe you don't even want to deal with the hassle of having to go into a place like that. With eBay Motors, it's so easy to find the parts you might be looking for. I did it when my wife had something I needed to replace in her car. I am not the handiest person, but if I could save a couple $100, I will. I don't think anybody is beyond that sort of expenditure there or saving that expenditure. And eBay Motors makes things so easy. You find all the parts that you're looking for your car, and it just takes a couple of minutes. You just enter what car you have or what car you might be looking for parts for, and you'll find a full, different subheadings, whether it's part for your engine or parts for your interiors or accessories, whatever you might be looking for. You'll find something very easily over at eBay Motors with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions do apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every dayers, make sure you tune in after Thursday night's game against the Brooklyn Nets for our post-game reactions. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube on your favorite podcast app. Let's talk about some fake trade packages that we put together for Zach LaVine, although you and I are basically on the same side of this. There's one, though, that I'm pretty excited to share.
Before we get into the deals, all right, is there a positive lighting that I'm just not seeing? I know you're a little higher on LaVine than I am, but aside from the money and everything else, do you think his fit could even be what many people want it to be?
He's a knockdown three-point shooter. The guy's lights out, 38% from three for his career. There is a world in which, if you believe Eric Spoelstra can get this out of him, you don't trade Tyler. You trade Lowry, and we'll get to some trade packages here. But if you make one of these trades and you're able to start Tyler Herro and Zach LaVine, that's like a Splash Brothers light kind of backcourt between what those guys are able to do from range. And when you're talking about what you need around Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, you need spacing, right? You need more shooting, and this team desperately needs more shooting. So in terms of just like square peg in square hole, the Heat need shooting. Zach LaVine is among the best three-point shooters in the league.
Struggling now, only 31% basically.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think he'll bounce back. I'm not that concerned about the small sample size here, but that would be, I guess, the only version of this that works. But it's not just the percentages that I'm worried about. It's the pull-up shooting. It's the fact that both guys, Tyler and Zach LaVine, probably don't take as many catch and shoot attempts as you'd probably like. What do they do if they're playing off the ball? That to me is the biggest concern. But if the Heat believe that they can get more catch and shoot, more off-ball movement stuff out of both of those guys, then I guess that would be the version of this that would at least theoretically work. Let's just do some of the trade packages quickly here.
Yep.
I have a couple here that are basically the same. Number one, Miami gets Zach LaVine. Chicago gets Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, Nikola Jovic, and a 2028 first-round pick. So you're getting Lowry's expiring. The Bulls, in all this reporting, kind of a quiet report here, want to keep DeMar DeRozan around long-term. DeRozan's I think they just like what he does for the young guys, what he means for the community. He's a face of the franchise. We know that Chicago is probably terrified of not having a face of the franchise. Keeping Lowry, getting Kyle Lowry might help them keep DeRozan around. Obviously, we know that Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan are very close. They haven't played together since 2019. So,
yeah,
since the 2018-2019, or I'm sorry, the 2017-2018 season. So you could get him there. Caleb Martin kind of gives them a defensive identity. Nikola Jovic is a nice young forward, and obviously the first-round pick is important. I have that one, and then I have a very similar one. Miami gets Zach LaVine and Javon Carter for salary filler. Chicago gets Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, and then 2 first-round picks, the 2028 first and the 2030 first. So basically the same kind of construction.
Framework, yeah.
You're not giving up Tyler Herro in either of those.
That seems... I don't know that it meets whichever team they have, whatever needs they might have. So it probably works, right? It's the kind of trade that both teams are probably unhappy about. So I guess they work in that sense. Like, I mean, it's not critical of your framework there. It's just like neither of them seem like Chicago wants a lot of draft collateral, and Miami's not capable of really sending nor willing to send.
I don't think it does. I don't think Chicago says yes to either of these. Honestly, I don't think that the draft capital is immediate enough, right? We're talking about 2028 and 2030. I don't know that the Bulls care about those years. I think
they'd have to be.
We got to do something now.
What is it, Arturas Karnisovas, right? Would he have? He'd have to be like really high in Nikola Jovic. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that that's a possibility.
The other one I have is Miami gets Zach LaVine. This is one I kind of like. And this is so those first 2 ones, I'm not even proposing them if Miami. And if I'm Chicago and I did get these proposed, I'd say no very quickly. I don't think those are good trades, but that's basically what I can come up with in terms of trying to match salary and whatever.
Right.
This one, at least I would have a meeting about if I were the Heat. I can't speak for the Bulls. Miami gets Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso, and Ayo Dosunmu.
Ooh.
Chicago gets Kyle Lowry and Tyler Herro. We've already established that Tyler Herro to Zach LaVine is not enough of an upgrade in terms of when you consider salary and age. But if you zoom out and look at the backcourt in totality, is the backcourt of Kyle Lowry and Tyler Herro right now better or worse than the backcourt of Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso, and then getting Dosunmu, who's a nice young player, coming off the bench? I don't think I kind of feel better about that backcourt, even in Miami's system, than I do the current backcourt of Kyle Lowry and Tyler Herro. I'm not sure I would go that far, but I think I would at least have a meeting about it where I'm like, okay, we can have Caruso, Jimmy Butler, Haywood Highsmith, and Bam Adebayo bracketing Zach LaVine in that starting lineup. That still could be one of the best 5 defenses in the NBA, even with Zach LaVine in the starting group. And then you get that score with Zach LaVine, plus the scoring that Bam and Jimmy Butler bring to the table. Caruso is basically everything that the Heat want Kyle Lowry to be right now, in terms of an all-world defender and a knockout three-point shooter. I would at least have a meeting about it.
How's Caruso's three-point splits this season?
44% this year. So again, small sample size. He's close to 38 to 40% for his career. He's a better three-point shooter than Kyle Lowry is at this point, and a much better defender. He might be one of these. He's one of the best 5 defenders in the NBA, regardless of position, probably.
So it's Kyle and Tyler and draft picks?
Nope, no picks. Lowry and Herro for LaVine, Caruso, and Dosunmu. And if you're Chicago, you're getting the cheaper, younger player in Herro. You're getting the expiring contract of Lowry. You're getting a jail out of free card on LaVine and Caruso's deal, even though the Caruso deal is not bad, but you're getting off that long-term salary. And then Dosunmu has a little bit of salary going forward.
I don't see Chicago taking that deal. I think for Miami, I think you could pretty strongly consider it. It'd have to be like a full buy-in from LaVine. Caruso, we already know what he's going to bring to the table, but I do agree with you that backcourt would be significantly better. And Dosunmu, I mean, he showed flashes. I mean, he could probably turn into an all-star here, given Miami's development system. So, I mean, that would be a steal for Miami in many ways. And you're getting I say the salary is problematic, but you're tying into a team that would probably be a top 5 defense over the next 5 seasons, and you keep that championship window open for a little while
It
longer.
would be an all-in on the championship window right now, too, wouldn't it? I mean, that's basically what it would be, even though you're sacrificing Herro's long-term output for LaVine in that contract and all the
but Caruso in a playoff series against Drew Holiday or Dame Lillard,
Pat Riley talks about sword and shields all the time. He's a sword and shield kind of guy, isn't he? So I love the Caruso idea here. I want to explore this a little bit more. I've got one more trade package. I don't love any of these packages. I would still probably say no if I were Miami on all of these. I think you and I are aligned on this. We're out on Zach LaVine in terms of a fit here for the Heat. Yeah. Caruso is a different story. Could the Heat actually get Caruso without getting LaVine in a bigger LaVine deal? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ibata. Turkey's great, but we all know the best part of Thanksgiving dinner is the sides. And with Ibata, you can make sure that you get the whole family their favorite sides and the turkey, all while getting yourself cash back. That's right. Starting November 1st, and for the 4th year in a row, Ibata is giving 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. You just add the offers in the app to redeem for everything you need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. All you have to do is shop at your favorite retailers. You're doing that anyway, and just upload the receipt. It takes seconds. My wife's been doing it for a while. You get money back. Who doesn't love that? Download the Ibata app now and use the code LOCKED. That's LOCKED, and you get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Just go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibata app and use the code LOCKED. That's locked. That's Ibata, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use the code LOCKED.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure you tune in after Thursday night's game against the Brooklyn Nets for our takeaways from the game and hopefully handing out some credit cookies. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. I got one more trade for you before we get to some stats and your hot take on Home Alone as a Christmas movie. But the last one here, you knew I had to come to the table, David, with something way more complicated than we needed to.
Of course.
I got a 3-teamer here.
Oh, boy.
That nets the Heat, Alex Caruso, without having to take on Zach LaVine. I kind of like this trade for everybody.
All right.
Miami gets Alex Caruso and Gary Trent Jr., who's on an expiring contract with Toronto right now.
Oh, my.
Chicago gets Kyle Lowry and OG Anunoby. And Toronto gets Zach LaVine and a future protected pick from Miami. And that's the deal. And I think everybody gets better in this trade, and I kind of love it. If you're the Heat, you get Gary Trent's expiring contract. He can be a scorer off the bench for you. Alex Caruso is your new starting point guard long-term. Chicago gets Kyle Lowry and OG Anunoby to basically switch everything from an offensive-leaning team to a defensive-leaning team. And then Toronto gets Zach LaVine, who I think is, when you talk about fits, Scotty Barnes and Zach LaVine, to me, actually intuitively makes a lot of sense in terms of a two-man game fit. He's somebody that could space the floor for an offense that can't shoot or score basically at all. I kind of like it for both teams. Well, all 3 teams, I should say.
Yeah, I guess DeRozan and OG have a history too. You could put OG at the 3, right? And I think, Patrick Williams, who they'd like to keep there, although the salary demands might exceed what Chicago is looking to pay. That's your front court. Front court of your future there. Like, it could work. It could work.
But I like the idea of the Heat getting involved in a bigger deal that nets them Caruso. So when we're talking realistically about what Zach LaVine on the move could mean for Miami, if I'm the Heat, I'm like, okay, LaVine, we will help facilitate wherever it is that you want to send him. You're not sending him here. But if we can get into a bigger deal where we're able to get Alex Caruso is going to get them a first-round pick. They're going to get a first-round pick for Alex Caruso. And if I'm Miami, I would strongly consider trading a first-round pick if it means getting Alex Caruso. The problem is for the Heat, I would do it. I don't think that Miami would do it. I really don't. But I think this team, from what we've seen, and we're going to get to these stats here in a second, I think that this 6-game win streak is far more representative of what this team is versus how they started this season.
Yes.
I think this team is good, and I think the Haywood Highsmith thing has transformed this team in a very meaningful way. And if you can get one more high-end player, Alex Caruso is not a schlump, man. Like, that guy literally has a championship ring. has a ton of playoff
Against Miami.
experience. He's, like I said, a sword and shield kind of guy, and he is everything that you wanted Kyle Lowry to be. He is that right now and will be that for several more years. I think it would be a home run. And if I'm like I said, I'm sick of saving all these first round picks for the trade that's never going to happen. Just go get the guy. You have the window right now. I think he makes a lot of sense. He's a good fit next to Tyler Herro in that backcourt when he comes back. I think it makes a lot of sense. So if I'm Miami, I would start getting in on this. If there's a Chicago Bulls guard that I want, it's Alex Caruso. It's not Zach LaVine.
That's fair. I agree 100%. I think most fans do too. I just don't know if he necessarily fixes Miami's greatest area of need. And if you're going to sacrifice some of that draft capital, again, I don't know if the better trade becomes available at some point. So I kind of agree with you that it's like, why save your powder for something that might never happen?
Yep.
You kind of going to have to lean into it and see if you can maximize your opportunity this season. And again, yeah, with all the different star guards in the Eastern Conference, like the ability to have Caruso and just stick that dog, let him off the leash and let him go to work, that certainly helps Miami. Like, I mean, even just talking through it and like thinking about him going on Dame Lillard or Jason Tatum or Jamal Murray if you meet in the finals, like that's what Miami needed last year.
The Heat have won 6 straight games, so I took a look under the hood to find some stats that can help explain what's going on. And I found what I found is really encouraging because I don't think that this is a matter of luck. So I have 4 different stats for you, and I'm going to talk about the first one here. Usually when we look at win streaks, the first thing I think a lot of people will look at is the make or miss league part of this. Is the other team just missing a bunch of threes and we're hitting a bunch of threes? And sometimes that's just enough to explain a small sample size of wins, right? That is not the case of what's happening here. In fact, Miami's opponents are actually shooting better from deep, 39.4% over this 6-game streak, which is like, that would be the best mark in the NBA. And the Heat are making just 35.4% of their threes, which is lower than their season average from distance. So if you can't write this off as just sort of a matter of shooting luck. In fact, it's the inverse. And the Heat, if they had something even a little bit closer to what these teams usually versus their opponents and them usually shoot, they probably have a lot more blowouts and their point differential is a lot better probably right now. So the shooting luck, I want to just get that out of the way. That is not why Miami is going on this streak. My next stat that explains the 6-game winning streak. Better shot selection. The Heat averaged a league low 10.5 makes in the restricted area in October. They also averaged 15 non-restricted area 2-pointers. So those dumb floaters, free throw line, like a lot of free throw line jumpers, a lot of dribbling into mid-range, a lot of that stuff. They averaged 15 non-restricted area 2-pointers per game and only 10.5 restricted area makes per game. Like I said, that's a backwards ratio.
Yeah.
That was in October. Go ahead.
No, I think that part of it is the loss of Tyler, who's kind of one of his strengths is the mid-range game and not able to get to the rim as often. Jaquez and Highsmith and Jimmy, like taking the leap that he has over the last few games. I think he's getting to the rim more often too. So that kind of makes a lot of sense that the statistics back it up.
They basically flipped it over the last 6 games. The Heat are averaging 17 makes in the restricted area and 12 non-restricted area 2-pointers. I think a little bit of his Tyler Herro. Let's not forget that Tyler Herro played in 3 of these games that the Heat won in a row. And so it wasn't like he was absent for these. And I think the biggest part when I was looking at this was Bam. Bam just getting into the restricted area a lot more and not settling for those free throw line jumpers. We've talked a lot about his evolution on this show, and that's been a huge part of it is not just taking what the defense is giving him and actually just bowling people out of the way and getting to the basket. And another big part of this is Jimmy Butler getting to the basket more and getting off of this slow start. So that's a big part of it too. Turnovers. The Heat are forcing 18 turnovers per game during the stretch and scoring 22 points off of those turnovers. Both marks are among the best in the league. Most of those turnovers are steals, 9.7 steals per game over this 6-game win streak. We could talk about Haywood Highsmith, right? Yeah. He's averaging 1.5 steals in this time. Jimmy Butler and Bam are both averaging 1.8. And Tyler Herro averaging a team-high 2 steals per game during the 6-game win streak. Of course, he's been hurt for 3 of these games, but all these guys are contributing to the steals, and Jaime Jaquez is at like 1.3 or something like that.
Yeah.
All these guys are contributing to getting those turnovers, and that's been a big part of Miami's formula. And then the last part here, David, limiting shots on goal, basically. The Heat are allowing only 11.5 second chance points per game. They're not allowing a ton of second chance points. The turnovers are a big part because it ends a possession without a shot and then creates an easy possession for yourself if you're the Miami Heat. So you get these swing possessions that really flip things around in their favor. So I just wanted to bring this up in saying it's not shooting luck. That's not the reason why Miami's on this 6-game win streak. And if all these things line up, if they are able to execute these things well going forward, this is their formula. Get more shots on goal than your opponent between the free throw attempts and the turnovers that Miami is getting, and then taking care of the ball on their end, not fouling the way that they have not been fouling. They've been doing a good job of that, not allowing those second chance points, and then just creating better and better shots, working to get those better looks and not settling for those mid-range jumpers. That's the formula for Miami. I'm not going to say that they're going to win the rest of their games, but I all of this stuff is very encouraging, and I think what we have here is a good basketball team.
How concerned are you about the shooting? Allowing the shooting that they do. Like they allow less 3-pointers than average, but they're fourth worst in the league in terms of 3-point percentage, 38.6 combined over the past 11 games.
I'm not that worried about it. I think they'll eventually that stuff evens out, right? I actually think Miami's best basketball is still ahead of them because of that. Other teams will go on shooting slumps against Miami at some point instead of shooting 36 to 39% every game, which it feels like they are. And that has a big deal to do with their the fourth quarter issues that they've had, which are not been as big of a problem lately, but still been a problem.
I mean, look at the teams below them, though. I mean, Memphis is worst, allowing 42%, San Antonio at 40%, and Cleveland at 39%. So not much better than Miami. I don't know. It's I know part of it is by design and everything else. They've been better at guarding shots at the rim, which is always helpful too. But I just wish they would be able to kind of balance that out. If they could get a couple percentage points off of an opponent's 3-point percentage and add it to their own, that would be ideal.
When you watch these games, though, eye test stuff, do you feel like they're not closing out? Because I watch Cleveland and Memphis and San Antonio, and I'm like, oh, they're just not closing out. They're playing bad defense. When I watch the Heat, I don't get the feeling like they're playing bad defense. Obviously, they allow open ones here and there. Who doesn't? But right. I don't see it as a structural issue or that they're purposely giving up open threes. I think they're closing out and opponents are making a bunch of tough shots.
I don't think it's necessarily by design, but I think it's just by virtue of having the switch heavy defense that they do. I think the fact is, you're kind of going on help defense and you're kind of moving around the perimeter a little bit, and that kind of leads the short corner. Specifically from the corner, it seems like teams have been hitting at a higher rate, and I don't have the numbers. I wish I'd thought of this before we started recording, but I feel like Miami's probably allowing close to 47% from the corners this season, which is astronomical.
Well, we'll see what happens here. But again, looking under the hood, I think we've seen a transformed Miami Heat team over these last 6 games, and and a team that's basically found the formula, the way that they have to go about winning here, and they've done it early in the season. All right, let's get off the basketball court here.
Oh boy.
Bam Adebayo tweeted on Wednesday, "Is Home Alone a Christmas movie?" David, I think you should weigh in here.
No, it is not. I haven't seen Home Alone in a while, mostly because it's not a very good movie. But when it comes to Christmas movies should be about Christmas, not just something tangential, not taking place in the middle of December. I saw a whole list to back up this argument. There's a whole bunch of movies that take place in and around the Christmas holiday season. They're not Christmas movies. Mean Girls, a Christmas movie? Absolutely not. Just because Die Hard is absolutely not a Christmas movie. I'm sorry. That's like saying Home Alone is a crime fiction. Just because they have the wet bandits trying to break into Kevin's house doesn't necessarily make them a crime movie. Okay, this isn't Pulp Fiction or anything like that. This is absolutely not a Christmas movie. There's Christmas decorations, but there's a million things going on, none of which really have anything to do with Christmas. It's Kevin's freedom. It's Kevin's parents being jerks and leaving him behind. It's the neighbor and whatever his sob story was, the wet bandits, everything else that ties into it, none of which is kind of related to Christmas. It's just kind of there. It's all mixed into this movie that has Christmas as a very, 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 very small part of it, which is not what makes it a Christmas movie. It's not about the Christmas.
So basically, if it's not about Christmas Day, if it's not about Santa Claus, if it's not about a snowman, if it's not about a reindeer, you're saying it's not a Christmas movie.
That's basically it. Yeah. I mean, even are Christmas romance movies really about Christmas? Yeah, maybe. At least the very least.
I feel like the spirit of Christmas is in Home Alone. At the end when they're reunited and in family over everything and that kind of thing. That's a Christmassy kind of message, isn't it? I disagree. The entire movie is soaked in Christmas. It's soaked in
No,
Christmas
it's
music,
not.
Christmas decorations. There's Christmas trees. There's toys. The whole reason the movie even takes place is because there's so many family members there in the house, which I think is very relatable when in terms of Christmas. Like for a lot of families, like they're just overwhelmed and underwater with all of their obligations.
Could have been any holiday.
A very relatable Christmas movie.
Could have been any holiday. Could have been any holiday.
What holiday could it have been? It couldn't have been St. Patrick's Day. You're leaving your kid at home because you're just overwhelmed with family members visiting.
St. Patrick's Day isn't a holiday. It's not a holiday. It's an opportunity to go drink. That's not the same thing. It's not a holiday.
That's what Christmas is for me. I don't care.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I know that is for a lot of people. Exactly. So you have no idea what the Christmas spirit is all about.
I feel like I do.
Getting drunk. No. You're too busy drinking. You can't.
What other holiday are you going to get overwhelmed with family like that?
Hey man, you're not Cuban. You don't know. Every holiday is getting overwhelmed by family. You got like 50 people all over, and I'm like, I don't even know. It's like a cousin comes out of the woodwork, and then they bring their girlfriends and their wives and everybody else. It's like, and sometimes at the same time, girlfriends and wives. You never know. That's the true holiday spirit right there.
Got their,
no idea who the hell you're talking about, and sharing a drink nonetheless.
87% of our audience disagrees with you. 87% of our audience says yes, Home Alone is indeed a Christmas movie.
They also think Die Hard's a Christmas movie.
Adebayo thinks it is too. Just saying.
Hot dogs aren't tacos.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every dayers tune in Thursday night for our post-game reaction after the Brooklyn Nets game for our takeaways from the game and hopefully some credit cookies that we'll be handing out. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast app.